This meeting is being recorded.
So we find ourselves on Mem Gimel Amud Beis on 43b. And what we're going to be talking about tonight is the Aravos. So we have Hoshana Rabbah, which comes at the tail end of the holiday of Sukkot. And we mentioned that, we start off, it's basically three lines from the top of 43b, Mem Gimel Amud Beis, Arava Shiva Ketzad, that you can have Arava being taken for all 7 days. Now, how does that occur? What happens is, if the final day of Sukkot coincides with Shabbos, we will actually have the Arava ceremony supersede Shabbos, and that's what would happen back then. Now you'll notice that today that's not the practice. Nowadays, Hoshana Rabbah might not even coincide with Shabbos at all. So we're going to talk about that in the Gemara tonight. So step one of the Gemara is talking about Hoshana Rabbah back in the good old days being Docha Shabbos. And then we're going to pivot and talk about why is it that nowadays Hoshana Rabbah will never supersede Shabbos. And that's basically our discussion for this evening. We're going to be talking about the Arava. All right, here we go. Arava Shiva Ketzad. So we're quoting from our Mishnah. How is it possible that Arava is taking 7 days? Arava b'shvi my time of Dachi Shabbos. So right, we were taught that when Shabbos coincides with the seventh day of Sukkot, which is Hoshana Rabbah, so then it will supersede Shabbos. Amar Rav Yochanan, why is that so? Why this day should supersede Shabbos? Rashi explains that what's it mean? It's the publicized from the Torah. Well, the Hoshana Rabbah ritual is not explicated anywhere in the Torah. However, standard, we've quoted it many times, the idea of taking the arba minim, the four species, that's explicit in the Torah, albeit the identities we needed to determine. But the Hoshana Rabbah, the idea of taking the aravos and doing hakafos around the mizbeach, around the altar, that's not something explicated in the Torah. Ihachi, luav nami lechi kidei lefars mashum in the Torah. But still, you might think that there's still an element to wanting to publicize a lulav. There's certain aspects of that we might want to publicize. So why not lulav as well on the last days or all the days? So, or even the first day, to be honest. On the first day, we hold that it's not docha in the end. Well, lulav gezer mishum teraba. We learned last shiur or two shiurim ago. It's a gezerah. Really, it would supersede Shabbos if Shabbos coincided with the first day of Yom Tov. Just midrabanan, they were concerned that you would carry it through Rosh Hashanah, and that's not actually the mitzvah. You're going to carry it to practice, and that would not be docha Shabbos. So they made a safeguard and said, don't take the lulav at all on Shabbos. But fundamentally, it would actually supersede Shabbos on a doraisa level. Ihachi, I have to warn you, there's a lot of ping pong tonight, by the way, a lot of back and forth. Ihachi, if this is so, Arava Nami Nigzor. If this is true, then why did we not make a similar gezerah, lest you come to carry your aravos in the public domain on Shabbos? So there's a difference logistically. Arava shulchi based in Maisila, lulav l'chol maser, that the aravos in the Beis Hamikdash were supplied by the staff of the Beis Hamikdash, but whereas you were expected to purchase your own four species, your own daled minim, and bring them. So if you are responsible to bring your own daled minim, so then then there's an actual concern you might carry it in a public domain on Shabbos. But if the aravos are provided by the Beis Hamikdash inside the Beis Hamikdash, we're not worried you're going to take them out of the Beis Hamikdash, which you shouldn't be doing anyway. It doesn't make any sense. So there wouldn't be that concern. Ihachi, if this is so, Kol Yom Nami Lidchi, then why isn't the Arava ritual, why doesn't that supersede any day that Shabbos might fall? Why not like just a random day of Chol Moed? Would it not supersede Shabbos? Because we do the Hoshanas every day. It's only on Hoshana Rabbah that there's a grander ritual, right? Even nowadays, we still do Hoshanas. We do one hakafa. We do one, what do you call it? One circuit. That's a word. One circuit on every day of Sukkot, and on Hoshana Rabbah we do 7 circuits. But still, you would think any day Shabbos falls out, it should be fine. So asi lefakfuke belulav. But the issue is we're going to come to think that lulav is less significant because here you have the aravos, which supersede Shabbos any day, and lulav only is able to supersede Shabbos on the first day. And we don't want the mistaken impression that a lulav is a lesser mitzvah. Okay, well, if that's true, the Lidchi B'Yom Tov Rishon. Why is it that it's the last day that supersedes Shabbos? Why not the first day? Lo Mucha Milsa. It wouldn't be clear. Amri Lulav Hu Kadachi. Everyone would think that it's really Lulav that's superseding Shabbos, not the Aravos. Ulidchi B'Chamehanach. Okay, then why not one of the other days? Gave it to Kamafakas Lami Rishon. Once we took it from the first day, which was reserved for Lulav, Ukbe Ashvi, they established on the seventh day on the other end, on the tail end of Yom Tov. So you have it bookended. The first day of Yom Tov focuses primarily on the lulav and the other 3 species, and then the last day of Sukkot focuses on the special Arava ritual. Hence, we get Hoshana Rabbah. As I said, there's a lot of ping pong over there. All of this is to get to the fact of why is it specifically on the seventh day of Yom Tov that if Shabbos coincides with Hoshana Rabbah, that's when we are going to do the Aravos anyway, but should it fall out any other day, it would not supersede Shabbos. All right, so that's as I said, a lot of
Rabbi,
ping.
I got to tell you, I'm really lost. I'm sorry. I got to be really, I'm not, could you just sort of summarize it again a little slower? I just,
Absolutely.
how is it any other day other than the last day? I'm just, I don't know. I need you to just sort of a
Sure,
little.
sure. Yeah, let's it's as I said, there's a lot of ping pong here, so I had to read it a few times myself before I got it too. So let me back up a little bit here. Right? So the Gemara was telling us that back in the good old, right? We don't do this nowadays. Nowadays, we don't have this issue. But back in the day, when you would have on the calendar that Shabbos could possibly coincide with Hoshana Rabbah taking the Aravos would supersede Shabbos. And then the question, the Gemara basically was going through saying, well, if that's so, well, why should it be any different than Lulav? Lulav, yeah,
And that would have been the 6th day of the holiday or the 7th?
Lulav is the only on the first day is the Lulav supersedes Shabbos. The first day is the highest level. It has to be your own. It's midoraisa for
That's the lulav.
everybody.
That's the lulav.
Yeah,
But
right.
with the Aravos,
It's the
that
seventh day.
it's the 7th, not the 6th. Okay.
Again, that's precisely why the Gemara keeps bouncing back and forth because, well, if it's a similar logic to why Lulav would supersede Shabbos only on the first day, then the Arava ritual should only supersede on the first day. But then the Gemara tells us, but we wanted there to be a distinction. We didn't want you just to think that Lulav superseded Shabbos, and then the Hoshanas they piggybacked on it. They gotta get a free ride. We wanted everyone to know that the lulav in its own right could supersede Shabbos on its day, and the Hoshanas can supersede Shabbos on its day. And so we didn't want them coinciding both on the first day. So once we removed the possibility of day one, it made sense to put it at the end of Yom Tov, so it's bookending, so to speak. That's
Okay.
the idea. Okay. Now the Gemara, that was part one for today. The rest of the Gemara we're going to do is part two. Part two is asking the following question. Ihachi ha'inanami lidchi. Okay, but nowadays, this was all back in the good old days. Nowadays, why is it that the Hoshanas does not supersede Shabbos? Even on Hoshana Rabbah, you can't take the Aravos. So that's what we practice nowadays. And this is interesting, right? The Gemara is noting that there were different stages in the development of how we practice these halachos. Back in the day, if Shabbos and Hoshana Rabbah coincided, you took the Hoshanas anyway. But nowadays, if they coincide, nowadays from the Gemara's perspective, I believe calendarically they can't coincide anymore. But from the Gemara's perspective, and the Gemara actually will talk about that. It will not supersede. The Aravos will not supersede Shabbos. If it's Shabbos, you don't take out the Aravos. So now that we know that that's the case, here's the question. Ihachi and Inami Lichi. We just gave a great argument for why the Hoshana should supersede Shabbos. So what changed? Why all of a sudden did we change our minds? So one possibility is, and this echoes what we heard last week, "Ana lo yadim b'kviyot diyarcha." We who are outside of Eretz Yisrael, it takes the messengers a while to get to us. We're not really sure if we have the right day, so we have 2 days of Yom Tov. So we don't want to accidentally, break Shabbos when it's not even necessary because maybe it's not even Hoshana Rabbah today. Maybe we miscalculated. Well, that's a nice answer, but in But in Eretz Yisrael, where they do know the precise date with certitude, so then why do they not take the Hoshanas even on Shabbos? So Ki Asa Bar Hadaya Amar Lo Ikla. This doesn't happen. Calendarically, Shabbos and Hoshana Rabbah do not coincide. Well, that's nice, but apparently, different people have different versions of the Ezra's Torah Luach. Ki asa Rabin v'chol nachusi. So when Rabin and the boys came down, Amri ikla v'lo dachi. No, actually, on our calendars, Shabbos and Hoshana Rabbah could coincide sometimes. And nonetheless, the Hoshana still does not supersede Shabbos, which leads us back to square one. Velakasha. Okay, if Shabbos and Hoshana Rabbah can coincide, we learned that there's a good argument that we want to publicize the importance of the Hoshana, so let them supersede Shabbos. So Amar Rav Yosef, Man Lemel da Rava ben Atila. Who says the mitzvah of a Ravos is analogous to the mitzvah of Lulav? Lulav, the mitzvah is you take the Lulav, you pick it up, you're Yotze. But Dila Bisakifa, maybe the mitzvah of the Arava is not to take it, not to shake it, but rather to stand it up next to the Mizbeach. Now, why should that make a difference? So Rashi fills in a little bit of exposition. Nowadays, we don't have altars anymore. In fact, we're not allowed to build altars anymore. We don't have a Mizbeach. So there wouldn't be I can see someone arguing that maybe the Bima, but there wouldn't be a modern correlative of the altar of old. So considering that there's no modern manifestation absent a Beis Hamikdash, there's no way to really fulfill it anymore. So since there's no real way to fulfill the mitzvah of Hoshanas as they did back in the good old days, which they would stand it up by the base of the altar, so then since we can't fulfill the mitzvah anymore, there's nothing to supersede Shabbos. It's not that fundamentally taking the Aravos and fulfilling that mitzvah doesn't supersede Shabbos. It's just that we can no longer fulfill the mitzvah because we don't have a Mizbeach anymore. That's the point that he makes. Let me pause for a moment because knowing this point is important for the rest of the Gemara. So, do you want me to repeat it, reiterate? Is it clear? What can I do? I'll reiterate it one more time just to make sure. Our issue is we made a really compelling argument that the Hoshanas, the Aravos, should supersede Shabbos and Hoshana Rabbah. Yet, that's not what we do today. We do not take the Hoshanas even when it coincides with Shabbos and Hoshana Rabbah. So what changed? Well, maybe what changed was you could only really do the mitzvah when you had a mizbeach, when you had an altar, and you could stand it up. Nowadays, we have no way to fulfill the mitzvah the real way they used to do it. Okay, we'll do our Hoshanas, we'll walk around with it, but that's not close enough to the original mitzvah of the Beis HaMikdash. So therefore, why would we supersede Shabbos with a ritual that doesn't fulfill the original practice? That's the idea. Very good. What's going to occur now for almost the rest of this Amud is Abaye is going to raise 3 attempts. Spoiler alert, he'll succeed on the final attempt to prove that no, the mitzvah of Arava is analogous to Lulav. The mitzvah is taking the Arava. And once Abaye eventually proves to us that taking the Arava is the actual mitzvah, we'll be back to the original question. Well, if so, why doesn't it supersede Shabbos today? All right, so think of this as like if you want to bracket off, it's like a huge parenthetical. You could I'll do my best to explain the whole ping pong match here, but the point is, all these next slides we're about to look at is Abaye just debunking the idea that the mitzvah arava is by standing it up by the altar. He's going to try proving that the mitzvah is the actual taking of the arava. All right, so here let's go through his three proofs, and the first two have rejections to them, hence we'll need a third one. Here we go. Isvei Abaye. Lulav va'arava shisha v'sheva, right? So we learned that a lulav and a arava, depending on the year, are taking either 6 days or 7 days. My lav kil lulav, ma lulav benatila, af arava benatila. We see that the Mishnah pairs lulav and arava together. So the fact that lulav and arava are paired together in the Mishnah, maybe I would think that they're very similar kinds of mitzvos. You take a lulav, you take an arava. That seems like a good assumption. Meaty area. How can he say? How can he say? No, we're just pairing them together because numerically each independent mitzvah will be 6 or 7 days. It doesn't mean that each one has to be fulfilled precisely the same way. So that's not a good proof. Rabbi was trying to prove from there that you have to take that rava to fulfill the mitzvah, but that's not really a strong textual reading, they argue. Attempt number 2 to debunk that the idea of the arava is that you have to stand it up instead of taking it. Isvei Abai. B'chol yom akivan es hamizbeach pam achas, v'os hayom sheva pamim. Every day of Sukkot, they make one circuit around the altar. On the 7th day, they make 7 circuits. My lav ba'arava. So what do you do in a circuit? You take the arava. That's the mitzvah, taking the arava, not leaving it stationary, taking it and moving with it. So, no, lo belulav. This description here is talking about going around with our lulav and esrog. And in fact, by the way, you go to shul on Chol, any day, Sukkot, Chol Moed, you are going to be going around with a lulav and an esrog. And our minhag is, even on Hoshana Rabbah, we only switch from the lulav and esrog to the aravos towards the end of Hoshanas. Rav Nachman, Amarav Baravua, Ba'arava. But wait a minute, didn't the great sage Rav Nachman, Barabba, Baravua say that no, they did go around with an arava. They took the arava as the mitzvah. So you know what his retort is? Great retort. Amar Le, who are lecha barava? Vana mi beluv. That's very nice. He has an opinion. I have an opinion too. His opinion is arava. My opinion is, my tradition I got is that they went around with a lulav. So, and indeed, Itmar Rav Elazar, Omer Belulav, Rashal Barnas, and Amar Rav Chanina, Barava. Right? So we have a machlokas. Some say it was with a lulav, some say it was with an arava. And we're just going to keep expounding on that. B'chin Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba Baravua, Barava. And here's another report, is with the arava. Amalei Rav Rav Yitzchak, Bered Rav Barchana, Baravira, Tav Imlacha Milsim Al Yasa. I'll tell you something great. To have a Amar Vucha that your father told me. Haditna, now which it says in the Mishnah, Kol Yom Akivan as Mizbeach Pamachas V'osa Yom Makivan as Mizbeach Sheva Pamim. That which we taught in the Mishnah, that they would go around and make one circuit every day, but then on day 7 they made 7 circuits. Hachi Amar Vucha, Mishmei Rabbi Elazar, Balulav. His tradition was they went around with a lulav, and if that's so, then Abaye's proof falls away. Abaye was trying to prove that they walked around with the aravos, which would prove that the way you fulfill the mitzvah of the arava is by carrying it, not by standing it up. But we see here that many traditions have it that they went around with the lulav, which means that the mitzvah of arava could have very well been fulfilled just simply by standing it up. So this leaves Abaye with one final attempt, and this will be the one that hits its mark. Isvei. Lulav doches a Shabbos b'tchilaso v'arava b'sofo. So we learned that the lulav. This is in a brisa, it's in a tosefta in a tosefta in the back. So lulav supersedes Shabbos at the beginning on day 1, and the aravos supersedes Shabbos on the last day. Pamachas kal shvi shal arava lios b'Shabbos. And indeed, here's a story time. There was a time where Shabbos coincided with Hoshana Rabbah. They brought little saplings, little shoots of arava before Shabbos. They put them in the the temple courtyard. Vikir behen by Tusin, and by Tusin, who were a sect that opposed the what you call the precursors of rabbinic Jews, the Pharisees. Unatalu v'kavshim tachas avanim. They hid them under stones because they believed that the Arava should not supersede Shabbos. So they wanted to hide the Aravos. Lamachar, hikir behen ami haaretz. Everyone realized something was amiss. They realized that they were hidden. Ushmatu mitachas avanim. They got them from under the stones. Ve'eviyam hakohanim uskufim mitzidei mizbeach. And then the Kohanim put them up by the sides of the Mizbeach. V'she'em baitusin modim shechibet arava dochas Shabbos. Because the baitusin, why they do this? Because they don't believe that chibut arava, that's the key word there, chibut arava. Generally, chibut means kind of like you think like the whacking of the aravos, but seemingly that implies the mitzvah is to take the arava. Alma benatilahu hi tiyufta. So we finally have a proof that does not have seemingly a retort to it, that Abai finally found a textual precedent which seems to indicate that the way you fulfill the mitzvah of the arava is not by keeping it stationary, but by taking the arava, and then afterwards they would station it next to the altar. But what all this is to say, right? So this was our big parenthetical, so to speak. What we gain from here is that the mitzvah of arava is done by taking the arava, not by stationing it. If this is so, then we do have a modern correlative. Simply, nowadays, here at a Good Shalom, we could take our aravos out and we can make circles. We could go make circuits around the bima, around someone holding the Sefer Torah. If so, the elilidchi. So we're back to square one. Why is it that if Hoshana Rabbah can supersede Shabbos back in the good old days, what changed that we no longer let it supersede Shabbos? Back to square one. So the Gemara says, "Kevadanan lo dachinan, inanami lo dachu." So the idea is that maybe we would make things even. Maybe since we outside of Eretz Yisrael no longer take it, those inside Eretz Yisrael can't take it, right? Remember earlier in the Gemara we said that outside of Eretz Yisrael, we don't know the precise dates of Yom Tov. We're worried. Sveika Yoma. Maybe it was today, maybe it's tomorrow. But in Eretz Yisrael, maybe they should be able to take it. And the answer is, since outside of Eretz Yisrael, we don't know what the precise date is, or we pretend at least, so too, we want halacha to be uniformed, so they're not going to take it in Eretz Yisrael either, so that way the halacha is uniformed. If a Yom Tov Harishon Lidan Lo Dachi Ledu Dachi. But wait a minute, we're comfortable with distinctions. Didn't we learn I believe last week's shiur that in Chutz La'aretz, outside of Eretz Yisrael, you don't take the lulav on the first day that coincides with Shabbos, but in Eretz Yisrael they do take the lulav when it coincides with Shabbos on the first day. So next line in the Gemara, going to the next Amud, very important. The Gemara gives us an important update. Breaking news. Amri, nami lo dachi. Nope. Even in Eretz Yisrael, they did not take the lulav on the first day of Yom Tov when it superseded Shabbos. Okay, great. So I see the uniformity now. I can see why if we don't take the lulav, why if I don't take the aravos outside of Eretz Yisrael, we want to keep it uniformed and not take it inside Eretz Yisrael either, even though they know the precise date of Yom Tov. But we also learned previously, we have a great proof which told us that the rabbis were comfortable distinguishing between Israel and between Chutz La'aretz, that in Eretz Yisrael you could take the lulav on Shabbos on the first day, but outside not, right? Velakasha. Hani Tarti the Tani Chada, right? We taught there were two Tanianic teachings we learned. One said, Kol ha'am molichen es luluvein lahar habayis. Everyone brings their lulavim to the Temple Mount. V'tayna idach, and the other brisa said the Beis HaKnesses. They brought it to the shul. And the question is, why does one say to the Beis HaMikdash and one says to the Beis HaKnesses? So originally the Gemara resolved it by saying as follows. Mutartzina kam bisman shebeis hamikdash kayim, kam bisman she'ein beis hamikdash kayim. Originally, we offered the distinction that the difference was when the Beis Hamikdash was standing and when the Beis Hamikdash wasn't standing. Even when the Beis Hamikdash wasn't standing, people in Eretz Yisrael still took the lulav on the first day of Yom Tov, even though their counterparts in Chutz La'aretz were not. So now we have to reinterpret this. What's the reconciliation? Lo, Aidi va'Aidi bisman shebeis Hamikdash kayim. Both prices are talking about when the Beis Hamikdash is standing. Lo kasha. Kam b'mikdash, kam b'gvulan. It's teaching us that whether it was in the Beis Hamikdash or whether it was outside of the Beis Hamikdash, they would bring their lulavim into the Beis Hamikdash before Shabbos. Of course, this is before the Gezeirah of Rabbah, which banned bringing lulav all together. All this is to say that this is what. Yeah, this is a wild Gemara, I know. All this is to say is that we no longer bring take the lulav on the first day of Yom Tov, even inside Eretz Yisrael, nor do we take the aravos on Hoshana Rabbah when it coincides with Shabbos. Though again, I'm fairly certain. Check your Ezra's Torah Luach that nowadays Hoshana Rabbah does not coincide with Shabbos, per the machlokus we had earlier in the Gemara. So again, if this was like a little bit of a wild ping pong back and forth, trust me, if it helps settle, I felt the same way when I prepared the Gemara. I had to keep looking it over and over, making sure that I followed the whole back and forth. But hopefully, we got some of the essential ideas from here. I guess if it ever helps, if you're ever like somewhere and people say that all these holidays and all the intricacies are were just made up in the past 200 years out of nowhere. We should know that there was a lot of work put into, a lot of thought already in Talmudic times. All right,
so Rabbi, well, hold on, don't run away.
I'm here.
So why do we still do 2 days of Yom Tov then? I mean, if the point was to be consistent with Israel, that everything should be the same inside and outside, why isn't it either both 2 days or just 1 day everywhere?
Yeah. So I think we asked a great question, which is, and I don't have a good answer offhand, the uniformity question, right?
Yeah.
If uniformity is such an important idea, well, I can think of a lot of halachos that are different between Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz. So why in some places?
What's another example? I mean, just
think about all the mitzvot lios baris in general.
What?
Sorry, just think about all the land-based mitzvos. We have a lot of mitzvos which are only observed inside Eretz Yisrael. I mean, Shemitah is just like one example, but there's so many. There's a lot of halachos that are exclusive to the land of Israel.
Well, I can understand something that involves the land.
Yeah.
But if it's not the land, if it's something
I'll give you another one, V'sein Tal Matar, right? We all just started saying V'sein Tal Matar in December. Right. In Israel, They were saying it much earlier already. So that's the Gemara in Tainus, which distinguishes between Eretz Yisrael and Bavel. So there's many things that distinguish. So I don't have a good answer offhand. It was bothering me also, like, when do we...
No, but you can understand if something actually involves the temperature, the weather, something that is physically different because it's Israel, that I could understand. Okay. But since there's no more a temple, then something portable like the aravos or the lulav or anything like that. So, and certainly 2 days, since we acknowledge that now we all know exactly when the new moon is, why should that be different? The moon is not restricted to Israel.
So the Tosas that we saw last week, I'm at Gimel Medav, Tosas cited the Gemara in Beitza, Dalet and Beis, which says, "Ela avad rabbanan ki'ilu lo yadinan mishum gezer dahasam." The concern, excuse me, getting over a cold. The concern that the Rabbanan had was that, even back then, before they had WhatsApp, before they had internet, many times, even outside of Eretz Yisrael, they knew precisely when the date was for Yom Tov. But the concern was that between this pogrom and that crusade and all these other calamities that were befalling the Jewish people, it wasn't just like they could just log on to Ma'izmadim, they would lose track of everything. And so as a protective measure. They said because the Jewish people were just running from one calamity to the next and couldn't keep a proper calendar together, they said in general, even when you know the proper date, we should operate as if we're constantly in a suffix. So that's what Tosfos Amid Gimel Amid Aleph says. Should things be updated nowadays that we have the internet? I don't
Is
know.
the phone number here, Melissa? Is that Melissa there?
Yeah,
So
that's
I have
Melissa's
to
number.
say, tonight is a classic justification for having all women's classes, because I never have the guts to ask so many questions when the men are on the line.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, I got to tell you.
Oh.
Right. You might want to make sure that the men stay on so that I keep quiet, but
Oh, yeah, well, if there's anything I can do, yeah, you should, as far as I'm concerned, you should always feel welcome to ask these questions. They're excellent.
they're not so excellent. Some of them, like I, are just saying, I just don't get it. But I'm
You
more,
know what? The truth is,
I feel
I'm
more
sure, I'm
free
sure
like
many of the men are just embarrassed to say it.
that could be, but I'm embarrassed in front of them.
Don't stop. Don't stop.
Well, I'm honored as a man that you're not embarrassed in front of me. So that's
No, Rabbi, you're okay. You're the best.
all right. All right. Well, it helps me because make sure I have to have clarity as well. So always feel welcome to the best that I can. But all right. Shkayach Toby, Audrey, Arlene, and Melissa. It's good learning together. And
So we have no class Thursday morning, right?
that is correct. No class Thursday morning and nor Thursday evening. We just fulfilled that now. And then we'll be back on to, and nor not on Sunday either.
I remember, yeah.
So a week from this
By the way,
Thursday.
it showed up on Sunday on the the bulletin, the class schedule that goes out with the bulletin.
Yeah.
On Saturday, yeah, the Friday.
To make sure that they correct that misimpression.
You're saying it currently says that this coming Sunday there's class?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I thought I submitted. All right, I'll have to check. I submitted.
I'm sure you did. I'm sure, but they didn't get it right.
All right. Well, just like some 50% of your bulletin suggestions go through, right?
Yeah. Until the third time when I say, well, I'm not going to do this anymore. If you're
Yeah.
not gonna...
I saw that. All right. Wonderful. Have a great and Freilich and Hanukkah, everyone.
Thank you. Same to you.
Take care.
Bye now.